Every marriage runs an invisible dictionary. The issue is that your wife's dictionary is different than your dictionary. And because of it, you're constantly saying the same words, but they constantly mean something else. And until you come to a point of alignment inside of it, you're going to continue to speak past your wife and through your wife instead of with your wife and have conversations. Think about how many times you've had fights that one simple word is the root of it. Love, intimacy, time, attention. These things are words that we all have our own definition of. And what they mean, if we aren't aligned with our spouse, will constantly mean something different. Now, you don't have to come to an agreement of the definition, but you have to understand that your wife has a different definition. And so we're going to talk about one simple conversation that you can have with your spouse in order to create alignment on the definition so that you at least understand your wife better. But before we get too far into that, if God feels distant, your wife feels last, and the kids are getting the leftovers, I want you to go to becomeagodlyman.com, watch the 6-minute video, and book a consult with me so that we can talk about how to change that. Now, I want you to think about some of the words that come up all the time inside of your marriage. Love, help, respect, quality time. All of these are words that you have an immediate assumption of what they mean. But how many times have you stopped and asked your wife, what do those words mean to you? How many times do you stop and try to figure out what it actually is that she's saying, asking for, requesting, or trying to help you understand when it comes to her? Most of the time, we don't stop to think about the fact that our spouse has a different definition than us. We just simply go with our definition and think that we're fulfilling whatever our spouse is asking for us. Now, I want to back it up for a second because love is a common one that we all sit down and think about when we say, I love you. What does it mean when you say, I love you to your spouse? What does it mean when she says it to you? What does it mean when they ask you to love them better? The Bible gives us a clear breakdown. This is one of the definitions that's common that we should have an alignment with our wives in order to truly understand it. Now, before I read this verse, I want you to understand I am not perfect at this. I fail at this all the time, but I have an agreement with my wife. When we say love, this is what we're referring to. And when you can come to your spouse and say, this is what I mean when I say I love you, and she understands it, and when she says it, she means the same thing, you're at an alignment point. Love is one of the words that we should have a definition because God tells us what it is. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4-8 read like this. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice with injustice, but rejoices when the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Some translations go on to say in verse 8, love never fails. Now, I want you to think about that for a second because chances are you are not loving your wife the way the Bible tells us we are supposed to love our spouses. But when you can come to an understanding of love is that with your wife, it becomes different. Because a lot of people say love in terms of infatuation. A lot of people say love in terms of quality time. And a lot of people say love as a weapon. A lot of people use it as a tool, but most people are not using it to its true definition. And so when you can stop and align yourself with the definition, it becomes a different conversation with your wife. Now, some of the other examples of quality time is a great one inside of marriage. What does it mean when your spouse requests quality time? Sometimes that's running errands together, spending the time to do the household stuff together. Sometimes it's I need a one-on-one date. What does a date mean, though? Think about that. What does your spouse view as a date, and what do you view as a date? Sometimes a date means dinner. Sometimes a date means getting out of the house. Sometimes going on a hike might not be a date to your spouse because it requires something out of them and they don't get to relax, right? And so when you stop and think about what a date actually is, what love actually is, what quality time actually is, you can start to see that there's a breakdown in conversation when you're having it with your wife. So when you can step back and look at it, you realize that part of what you're fighting about is you two are saying the same thing, but you don't mean the same thing when you're having those arguments. You have to be able to step back from that moment and be able to go, what is it that you're truly asking for or saying right now? So if that's true, that you're unaligned on the definitions and you don't know how to get to a point of alignment with your spouse, then what is the consequences of not finding the solution? Most of the time, the consequences are pretty obvious. Resentment. Building walls with your spouse. Walls are not built in marriage in a single fight. They're built one fight at a time by putting one brick in place. And every fight you add a brick to that when you cannot come to resolution and having an easier understanding inside of your marriage. And so when you can come to at least understanding what your wife is saying to you in those moments, you will allow for connection. You will allow yourself to find what is broken. And when you can push through that and come to understanding with your wife, you'll allow yourself to start removing the bricks in the wall, one brick at a time. But until you understand that, you're going to be constantly fighting with your spouse. And I want to solidify this with scripture as well, because we think that we're constantly fighting with our spouse, but that's not what the Bible tells us. The Bible tells us that we are fighting against spiritual forces. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 reads, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in the dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." So when you think about having a fight with your spouse, you're not actually fighting with your spouse, but we typically end up fighting with our spouse because we're not fighting for the right things. We're fighting to win. We're fighting to create. We're fighting to have our way. And we're fighting because we don't understand our spouse, because we don't take the time to understand our spouse. We don't try to grow with our spouse. Now, I want to plug this in one more time for those of you who are sitting here watching this, realizing that you want to be a better husband and a better father. If you feel like God is distant right now, your wife is the last priority that you have, and your kids are just getting the leftovers of the time that you have, I want you to go to becomeagodlyman.com. I've got a 6-minute video on there for you talking about how to make this adjustment, and you'll get a book of free consultation with me, and we can see if there's a way for us to fix that for you. Right now, I'm opening up to work with 6 to 8 men, and I'm only doing this for the next 7 days. And so if you want your chance to get one of those, click the link, watch the video, book the call, and I'll hop on with you and we'll figure out what's the best way to make the course of action. Because we are not fighting against flesh and blood. And so you have to start fighting against the spiritual forces. And how do we actually make this adjustment? How do we actually make the change to start having better connection? Most of the easiest times to identify that there's an issue is right after a fight, not during the fight, right after the fight. Once you get good enough at this, you can do it during the fight and you can stop the fight, but at least try to start working on after the fight, identifying what the problem is. Now, before you get too far into running at your wife in a fight and trying to ask her what the definition is, start this week with one simple task. Find a time to sit down with your wife. Write a list of 5 of the most common words that you guys are fighting about right now. And ask your wife to give her the definitions of those words in her terms. And before you do that, write down your definitions. So that as you're sitting there having the conversation with your wife, you can easily say, I see why we're fighting about this. You say quality time is when I sit and talk with you. I thought quality time was when we watched a movie. You're saying a date night is only when we don't have the kids and you don't have to do anything. I thought a date night was fine if we went and did a physical activity. But because you're with the kids all the time, you need something where you can sit and relax and talk. And I'm misunderstanding because our definitions aren't the same. And you will start to prevent fights, take off bricks in that wall that you're building, clear the resentment air that's right now building inside of your marriage. As you're sitting here having these fights, there's that resentment air that you can feel as you walk in the room where your spouse is cold. And that's because you have not figured out how to have these conversations. So start this week, write down 5 of the most common. I highly recommend talking about love. I highly recommend writing your definition of love, asking your wife and pulling scripture. I highly encourage quality time as one of them. And then think about 3 other words that are the most common inside of your marriage that you guys are fighting about. Is it discipline with the kids? Is it schedule? Is it timing? Is it bedtime? Right? All of these are things that we each have our own understanding. We each have our own take on these words. It doesn't mean that it's going to fix the fight, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to change everything. It doesn't mean that it's transformational, but it means when you're fighting, you know what your spouse is fighting for, why your spouse is fighting against you. And it can prevent fights if you're willing to take the action steps against that. And that's what I'm here to do. And that's why I want to say it. If you're ready to take action steps to stop fighting with your spouse, start putting God as the priority in your life, build quality time with your wife and kids, I encourage you to go to becomeagodlyman.com, watch the video, and I'll break down for you how we can start putting the priorities in the right place. Build time with your wife and kids, build time with God in a daily cadence, and how we actually set the right standards. So if you're ready to start taking action, not just listening, not just watching, not just sitting on the sidelines hoping that something's going to change, but start actually putting the principles in place, go to the link, watch the video, and book a call, and let's have a conversation of how we can actually start changing you as a man, becoming the godly man that you're meant to be, and focusing on building a better marriage, relationship with God, and relationship with your kids. It starts with you. You're the husband. You're the father. You're the man of the house. God has put the weight on you. Does not mean you have to do it alone, though.